Welcome to the Speaking Skills video in our IELTS Superstar series. I am your teacher Ali, and I will be introducing you to some special skills and strategies to help you to get a superstar IELTS score. The speaking component may seem like the easiest part of the IELTS test, but it is still a good idea to practice hard and be well prepared. If you are thoroughly prepared and perform well, you can get a high score. The speaking part of the IELTS test takes the form of an oral interview with an IELTS examiner. It takes between 11 and 14 minutes and it has 3 parts. In the first part, you will have an interview where the examiner asks you a series of questions about everyday topics such as work, study, family, home and lifestyle. In the second part, the examiner gives you a card on which is written questions about a specific topic. You will be required to talk for 1 to 2 minutes about the topic. In part 3, you will be required to talk with the examiner about issues related to the topic. Let's now look at each part in more detail. We will teach you examples of the kinds of questions you can expect, teach you some special skills to deal with the text, and show you some videos of an examiner and a candidate during the test. In the interview, the examiner will ask you some questions about general topics, usually about things that are personal to you, such as your country, your hometown, your family, your studies, your work, or your favorite leisure activities. Here are some of the most common questions.
How are you today? Are you a student? Where are you studying? What is your major? What is your favorite subject? Do you have a job? What work do you do? Where do you work? Do you enjoy your work? Where do you live? Do you like living there? Are you married? Do you have any brothers and sisters? Do you have a pet? Have you ever travelled abroad? Of all the countries you have travelled to, which is your favourite? What do you like to do in your spare time?
Here are 3 tips for the interview part of the test. It is quite possible that you may not understand what the examiner says to you at some point in the interview, and you might have to ask the examiner to repeat the question or to clarify the question. So you can learn sentences and phrases such as,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you say that again, please? I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean. Could you clarify for me, please?
Remember, the examiner is trying to find out what you know and how well you speak. So you should try to develop your answers into several sentences. Let's have a look at an example.
Where do you like to go in your free time? The library.
That answer is a bit too short. Now let's look at how the candidate has developed the answer in this example.
Where do you like to go in your free time? Well, I often go to the library because I like to read English books, but I can't afford to buy too many of my own. I also like the quiet atmosphere in the library. I can really concentrate on my reading, and I know that nobody will disturb me.
If you are silent, the examiner will think that you don't know how to respond. The trick is to respond with filler expressions. These will allow you to talk while you are thinking about your answer. Some good examples are,
That's an interesting question. You know, actually, I think that, well, to be completely honest, it's difficult to say. Let me think.
Now let's look at a video of part of a real interview with an examiner. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ali Mackay. Can you tell me your full name, please?
Yes, my name is Ong Wei Yi.
Can you tell me where you're from?
Yes, I am from Tainan City.
Can I see your identification, please?
Sure, here it is.
Now, in this first part of the test, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. First of all, are you a student or do you work?
Actually, I graduated last year with a degree in international business from National Cheng Kung University, and right now I am preparing for my IELTS test.
So, you want to study abroad?
Yes, I'm planning to study on a master's degree in the UK in marketing management.
Why did you choose marketing?
That's a good question. Let's see. I think it is because I am interested in the ways a company can maximize its sales through using clever marketing strategies. If a company is good at marketing, it can maximize its competitive advantages. I want to be a great marketing manager.
Okay, and why have you chosen the UK as your study destination?
I believe that UK universities can offer a safe environment in which to study. Also, the academic standard seems to be very high and the professors are excellent. That's what I have heard from friends who study there. Plus, I'm interested in the history of UK and the culture there.
Let's talk about your family. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I have 2 sisters.
Do your parents work or are they retired?
My father works in a bank. He is a financial advisor. I think he loves his work and never wants to retire. My mother is a housewife.
Do you have a pet?
Yes, I have a white cat. He's very fluffy. I have to comb him every day, but that's okay. I love looking after him.
Have you ever traveled abroad?
Yes, I have been to Japan, Korea, and Singapore.
Of all the countries you have traveled to, which one is your favorite?
Well, to be honest, let me think. Actually I would have to say my favorite country was Japan because I love the architecture of the Japanese temples and the food is great.
Where do you like to go in your free time?
Well, I often go to the library because I like to read English books, but I can't afford to buy too many of my own. I also like the quiet atmosphere in the library. I can really concentrate on my reading and I know that nobody will disturb me.
Thank you, that's fine. In this part of the test, the examiner will give you a topic and some instructions about the topic. You will be given 1 minute to read the card and prepare to talk on the topic. You will then be required to talk about the topic for 2 minutes. Let's have a look at the kinds of questions you will see on the card. Here's an example of a question card.
Describe something that you own that is very important to you. You should say where you got it, how long you have had it, what you use it for. Explain why it is important to you.
Here are 3 tips for this part of the test. The first thing you should do when you receive the card is look very carefully at the instruction words. We can see that in this example, the instruction words are
describe and explain.
So there will be 2 parts to your speech. In the first part, you will need to describe the important thing that you own. And in the second part, you will be explaining why it is important to you. You might decide to allocate 1 minute for each part. The famous writer Rudyard Kipling once wrote,
I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who.
You should use all 6 question prompts to help you think of more ideas for your speech. For example, let's look again at the example question.
Describe something that you own that is very important to you.
You can add these questions.
When? When did you buy this important thing? Who? Did you buy the important thing from? How does this thing make you feel?
You need to keep talking until the examiner asks you to stop. If you stop before the 2 minutes have elapsed, then you might be penalized. Let's now have a look at another example. Here is another question card.
Describe someone who has had an important influence on your life. You should say who the person is, how long you have known this person, what qualities the person has, and explain why they have had such an influence on you.
We can add 2 more question prompts of our own.
When did you meet? Where did you meet?
Let's now listen to a candidate giving a 2-minute speech about this topic.
The person I'm going to talk about today is my teacher from high school. Her name was Miss Chan and she taught quite a few subjects at the school. She had been working there for quite a few years when I met her, I think. We met for the first time in my English class. I remember this well because she was quite young compared to most of the other teachers in the school, so I was surprised that she was a teacher. In fact, she looked more like she could have been one of the older students. So, I met her when I was 15, and that was 10 years ago. I don't actually know her anymore as we lost contact after I left the school, but I still remember her very well for several reasons. Firstly, she was very kind. She always treated all the students very well in class, and I can't remember her ever shouting at anyone. Also, she had a really good sense of humour. She would make jokes in the class, which most of the other teachers never did. The other teachers were very serious all the time, and she made the classes a lot of fun and very interesting, something that I think is very important, otherwise you start to get bored. Oh, and also she explained things very well and clearly. Often teachers are not able to do this in a way that students can understand, especially when it's complicated subjects. So those are the qualities that she had. The reason she had such an important influence on me is because I was a shy person at school and not very confident, but she helped me to change this. Each year there was a school play that would be held in front of all the parents, and that year when I was 15, Miss Chen was organising and directing the play. I really didn't want to be in it because I was so shy, but Miss Chan insisted that I take one of the roles, and it was one of the main roles, which meant that I had to do a lot of speaking. I was so nervous. Anyway, I went ahead and did it, and on the night I did really well and really enjoyed it, and that really boosted my confidence, and that has helped me to this day. So my teacher, Miss Chan, is the person who has influenced my life, and I will never forget her.
In this part, you will talk with the examiner about issues related to the topic. This discussion will be on less personal and more general topics. For example, in part 2, you may talk about a teacher you had at school, but in part 3, you might talk about education in your country. If you do well in this part of the test and give thoughtful, extended answers that directly address the question, it will show that you have a high band level. Remember that it is important to give a variety of phrases and varied vocabulary and grammar when answering the questions. Now let's look at some techniques that can help you answer the part 3 questions in a more confident and fluent way. Here are 4 tips. A good way to extend your answer is to respond with a paraphrase of the examiner's question. That is to say, you start your answer by repeating the question sentence using different words that have the same meaning. Let's look at some examples.
What can people do to try and reduce water pollution? So, what can people do to ensure water is kept clear and free of pollutants? Well, in my opinion, How can events like the Olympics improve international relations? How can sports bring people from different countries together? That's an interesting question, I think.
To talk at more length about your opinion, simply assume that the examiner has no knowledge at all about the topic. Pretend that you are talking to a child who knows nothing about the topic, and then explain your feelings behind your opinion. By asking yourself why, you can continue to explain your opinion, and this will lead to a more developed answer. For example,
what can people do to reduce water pollution? I believe the best way to keep water clean is to curb water use at home. Most water is used in the home for cooking, cleaning and washing. By reducing the amount of water we use, the government can conserve the water supply and keep it clean.
in order to really develop your answer, you should try to give an example. Here's an example.
Have the modes of transport in your country changed much over the last few decades? Yes, they've changed a lot. For example, a recent survey showed that more than 70% of people in Taiwan use the high-speed rail on a regular basis.
Don't worry if you have to make up the statistic. The examiner will not check it. Making a concession means that you admit that there are limits or downsides to your argument. We can use words like
However, on the other hand, despite this,
to introduce the concessions.
to what extent do you think advertising affects people's shopping habits? I don't think advertising affects the way people shop at all. They already know what they want before they go shopping. However, companies continue to spend a lot of money on advertising, so it must have some effect.
Now let's have a look at a real Part 3 question and how it can be answered. Let's say, for example, that the card in Part 2 has the topic of travel.
Describe a memorable journey you have made. You should say where you were going, how you were travelling, why you were making the journey, and explain what made the journey so memorable.
We can see that the card asks personal questions. In Part 3, the examiner will develop the conversation, asking you more general or thematic questions. Let's look now at how this candidate answers 3 questions in Part 3.
How do most people travel long distances in your country?
I'd say that the main ways are cars, buses and trains. If someone has a car, I think this is their preference, because to be honest, the trains are not much cheaper where I live. Also, there are often delays with the trains, which can be a real pain, so you may end up with a really long journey. The buses are a bit cheaper, but I don't think that is such a comfortable way to travel. There is the option to travel by plane as well, of course, but most of the budget airlines go abroad. You can't really travel that cheaply by plane within the country. So then, cars are really the best option, and of course they give you the most freedom when you are travelling.
Have the types of transport people use changed much over the last few decades?
I don't think they have really. We've had the transport I mentioned before for many decades now in my country, and it is much the same today. Of course, cars have become more popular as people's incomes have risen, which accounts for the problems we see on the roads today, such as congestion, more accidents and pollution. This has probably led to some changes within cities. Many have now introduced environmentally friendly forms of transport, such as trams and guided buses that don't run on gas, and that means people can travel without using a car. There has also been an increase in air travel, but like I said, that is quite expensive in my country, so most cannot afford it.
What kinds of improvement have there been in transport in your country in recent years?
There has been several ways in which transport has improved. More major roads have been built, which means it is easier to travel long distances. Though, of course, some would argue that more roads are not an improvement. They can be an eyesore in the countryside, and they have encouraged more people to drive, which may mean these improvements ultimately don't work because there are more cars using the roads. As I mentioned before, there has been the introduction of mass transit in major cities, such as trams and trains. In our capital city, they have also extended the underground system, so now it links to many more areas of the city. This has helped many people, as commuting times are horrendous if you travel on the roads. Those are the main improvements.
We have now reached the end of this video. We do hope that you have enjoyed watching and have found the information useful. Remember, prepare well, study hard, and then relax in the test. And you too can be an IELTS superstar.